planning on covering today. It looks like quite a long list, but hopefully it shouldn't take too long to get through. So I'm just going to quickly cover the subtle differences between what PR, public relations, and marketing is. They are they often get confused as the same thing, but they are subtly different. Research and goals. This is about deciding what it is you're trying to achieve with your PR, whether it's recruitment, community engagement, liaison with church, fundraising, all of those things. The things around planning being crucial in understanding what you're going to do, when, how, who, what you need by way of resources, etc. And therefore thinking creatively about engaging all of that needs to be considered, and what tactics you're going to use to be able to do that. Thinking about what the best media is suited to the message that you're trying to get out, whether it's newsletters, websites, social media, TV, radio, print press, whatever. The one big thing I learned through Ringing Remembers is having a contacts list. Can't underestimate the importance of that. And we'll go into that. I'll talk about some general principles around things that you might want to employ when you're pushing out your public relations material. And if you're looking at this from a bigger group perspective, you might need to consider some particular branding for your event or as an association. Dealing with the press, this can be a minefield. The press always have an agenda. And dealing with them and their egos is quite difficult sometimes. But we want to generate buzz around our PR, our event, our promotions, our have a go sessions, whatever it is you want people to be talking about. Unfortunately, though, we do have to sometimes think about how we might deal with things in a crisis. Someone may have been injured, for example, and the press got involved. What then? Who do you deal with? What do you say? Who do you say it to? And then my last but one slide gives you a link to some resources on the Central Council website that you might benefit from. If you're holding an event, they might be useful for you. And then, as I said, if we've got any time at the end, it'd be great to hear your examples, and I'll do my best to answer what questions you might have. Okay. So let's kick off then looking at what the subtle differences are between PR and marketing. So public relations is about researching, and this is about understanding you, your organisation, your tower, your district, your association, what it is about them that you're trying to attract people to. Who are the people you're wanting to target, and how well does what you're offering fit their objectives? So if you think about the scouts and the guides, for example, if you wanted to attract younger ringers and we're looking at the uniformed organisation, how does it link in with what they do? Can they achieve a badge or some sort of recognition for volunteering or community engagement or something like that? How would you package ringing to fit something that they already do in whatever walk of life it is? Strategic planning, this is fancy talk for basically deciding who your target audience is, and this is depending on what you're trying to achieve. So if you're looking to fundraise for a restoration project, for example, who do you want to approach for grants? How does the project interrelate to their core activities and their values? So how can you really guilt trip them into giving you a nice juicy fat grant for your fundraising? What messages are you trying to convey? Publicity, this is the real meat. This is about getting the visibility for your event or your fundraising. If you want to hold an open day or have a go session, you want people to hear about it. Yeah, you want people to turn up. This is the proactive placement of information, and be prepared to put a lot of effort in here, because the more effort you put in, the greater chances of success you're going to have. I'll give you an example. A tower not very far away from where I live in Essex had an open morning on a Saturday morning, and they complained after the event that only 2 or 3 people turned up, and they said, but we had ringers there ready to do some demonstration ringing, we had tea and coffee and cake and everything laid on. So I said, well, how did you publicise it? And they said, well, we put a notice in the parish magazine. Is that it? Oh, no, we put an A4 notice outside the church. Okay, what you've got to bear in mind is this church is down a track. It's not on a main road. It's not in a town centre. It does not get passing traffic. The most you get is, you know, people taking their dogs for a walk on the green. So they were not going to get passing traffic. And the effort that they put in did not produce people coming through the doors, because they didn't really put a huge amount of effort into getting their information noticed. Stakeholder liaison. So again, this is dependent on the kind of project you're running. Do you need to engage with community dignitaries, with the local council, with church authorities, with businesses, with schools, youth groups, the WI, contractors, investors, all that kind of stuff? In the Central Council, we need to engage at a very senior stakeholder level with people like the Church of England and government departments. And, you know, we'll be honest, we haven't really done particularly well at that in the past. But now we've got this senior stakeholder work group. We've really started having those serious conversations now, getting bell ringing on to the agenda, you know, helping us develop responses to things such as COVID. But never forget that your own members within your own band, within your own district, within your own association, they are also your stakeholders. So you need to keep their loyalty and their enthusiasm to make sure that you retain them. Training, this is about PR and training around public relations. So this is about involving coaching someone perhaps to talk to a local interest group or to the media, or to give a presentation like this. You may need to advise someone on what to say about a particular incident. I've recently had a number of calls regarding a particular incident where the press got hold of an accident, and they wanted to know how they should liaise with the press, but they were also concerned about how they liaised with their own membership, because local people wanted to know what was going on and you know, how's it going to affect ringing going forward, etc. But you've still got to respect the privacy of the people concerned. So you need to be cautious about how you do that. Marketing is subtly different. So marketing is more about the 4 Ps. Product or service in our case. This is about a tangible product and what it looks like. For example, a leaflet about bell ringing that you might have as a takeaway at an event, or the service that you provide, so ringing for a wedding or a community event, or Saturday morning ringing schools, or whatever it is you're trying to hold. Price, well, that's obvious. How much are you going to charge? So if you're going to run a training event, there may be costs associated with that. Hall charge, refreshments, production of handouts. You might want to offer the host of the event some expenses. If you're going to run a regular Saturday ringing school, for example, you might want to charge a nominal fee to make sure that people who say they want to come actually do come. In which case you've got to think about a realistic price tag to put on it to cover your costs. Place is about referring to the channels of distribution where you're going to get this information out to. Who do you want to participate in your project, on your product, sorry. If you've produced a booklet about ringing, who are you going to sell it to? Are you going to put it on your bookstall? Are you going to sell it online? Are you going to have it at coffee shops? Whatever. If you're holding a training event, how do you want people to register to attend? And where's it going to take place? And promotion, well, that's about the advertising, the selling, and of course, that's where the public relation bit links in. So just to expand on some of those bits, so research and goals. So this is where the planning starts, really, for your event. And again, this is dependent on the kind of event that you are undertaking. So by conducting a basic assessment of internal and external factors, this doesn't need to be anything too onerous. We're not talking about, you know, writing great big project plans and stuff. It could be, you know, on the side of an A4 sheet of paper, but it's just having something that defines what it is that you're trying to achieve, and doing some background work on what that might mean. Your internal factors could include things like resources that you have available already, and this could be the people in your tower or district or association who are willing to help. It could be funds that you've already got in the bank. It could be handouts and leaflets. It could be a portable mini ring. You know, you might know someone who's a scout leader, so that gives you an in to scouts or something. Or you might know the person who looks after the church bookings, for example. External factors are things like knowing your audience, understanding about when the guides group meets, who their brown owl is, who edits the parish magazine and when is it produced, how do you hire the hall, who the presenter is on a local radio show, for example, which bell hangers to go to get quotes for things, who might be able to lend you a low loader lorry if you're taking your bells off to the foundry. This all, of course, depends on the kind of project you're trying to run. You can understand some of these things by simple means, just as asking questions. Do you know anyone else who's done something similar? What worked? What didn't work? How did they approach people? Who did they approach? How did they find out where to go for information? If you're running a regular Saturday school, for example, how much would people be willing to pay? What would they expect to get for their money? Ask these questions of your existing ringers and people of nearby towers who've already done these things. What did you get out of it? How did you hear about it? Why did you come? Why didn't you come to certain things? And if you're doing a restoration project, for example, you might want to ask, what information do people need in order to provide you with a quote? You might need to find from the PCC what they need by way of documentation or faculty and things like that. Review what you currently have. Have you got posters? Have you got leaflets and handouts and presentations and notice boards and old press articles and things like that? Are they still fit for purpose? Think about if you're reaching out to youth groups for recruitment, have you got bright, engaging pictures that show people having, you know, a good time while they're ringing? Or have you still got the ones from 1975 with the pullovers and the sandals and socks? You know, make it relevant, make it current. If you're writing an article for a magazine, think about when the article is going to be published and whether you have some, you know, good images to go with it, or do you need to go out and get some? Internet search is great. It makes life so much easier to see what's already out there by way of articles, literature, and so on. Just a word of warning, be extremely careful when using someone else's image from the internet with regard to copyright. If you get that wrong, it can be seriously expensive. Any safeguarding issues around photographs and anything that might bring ringing into disrepute. Make sure if you're using photographs that you've got all the necessary permissions in place to share them. Defining your goals is where you need to decide what your key message is. If you're going to do a recruitment campaign, for example, you could extol the virtues of the health and well-being benefits of ringing, for example. So some of the key information we got from Ringing Remembers campaign was that people joined in because they wanted to feel part of a community activity. Some had a bereavement and wanted to make new friends and get them a more social, active life in their community. It's a great leveler, you know, across generations, across families. We had some great stories about whole families that learnt to ring, you know, mum and dad and the children, and the kids just love the competition with their parents about who can get to the next stage quickest. And if they can beat the adults, that's even better. Be clear about what your objective is and specific. In business arenas, you might have heard of the SMART acronym for objective settings. So this is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. If your project is going to be big and long-term, so maybe like a restoration appeal or something, be conscious that, you know, how much do you need to raise, by when, what for, who are you going to tap for grants, how much are you realistically going to raise from that cake sale in the church, when do you need to submit faculty documents, and everything else that goes with it. Is the audience for your message new recruits or local community groups or contractors you might want to engage with? Think about who they are and how old they are. What other interests might they have that impact on the time that they can give to ringing, or may give you another outreach opportunity to talk about ringing? What's their socioeconomic status? If you're asking them to commit to a regular fee for a Saturday ringing school, for example, can they afford it? Do you need to think about ways to make it more affordable for them to join in? what do you want the response from your audience to be? If you're targeting a youth group, for example, and offering a have a go session, could you really handle it if 20 to 30 teenagers turned up with their group leaders all at the same time, all wanting to have a go? Is that realistic to have in your tiny little 6-bell tower somewhere? Maybe not. If you're targeting a company for a grant for your restoration appeal, how much are you going to ask them for, and why? Why should they give you the money? Be specific in what you want them to do once they've heard your message. Think about the best way to reach your target audience. Do you go with the personal approach, have a chat after church or at a group meeting? Do you need to think about wider reaching and committing something to print to share? Where are you going to send your print article? Are you going to use the parish magazine? Is it going to be in pew slips, notice boards, newsletters, newspapers? Do you need to talk to the press on local radio or TV or via their website? So planning, again, this doesn't need to be War and Peace. This is commensurate to the type of project you're undertaking. It could be a very simple side of A4 or a spreadsheet, just as an aid memoir, so you don't lose sight of what you're trying to achieve. For bigger scale things, it might need to be a little bit more formal. For example, I've just drafted an outline strategy document for public relations and communications for the Essex Association, where I am, which is at more of a granular level of detail, and includes, it goes into the level of detail, for example, like how you should sign off emails if you're an association officer. Clearly, at a local tower, you probably don't need to do it to that extent. However, for some purposes, as part of your grant submission documentation, for example, you might need to flesh things out a little bit more. So start with an overview of the project. Include the challenges that you might face that your PR campaign is designed to help you overcome. This could be that you don't have sufficient bell ringers to ensure continuation of bell ringing at your church. So you might intend to approach a number of interest groups for recruitment purposes. And part of that recruitment activity may be the hosting of having additional have a go sessions. So your goal, therefore, is not only to increase the number of ringers you have, but you might also be looking to raise funds to help you purchase a simulator to avoid annoying the neighbours with ringing every evening. Insert appropriate SMART objective here. List the methods that you will help you achieve your goals. And this could include things like press releases, interviews, articles, advertising, presentations to interest groups, all of that stuff. Think about your target audience as before. Are you connecting with young people, university groups, the 20 to 40 age bracket, the WI, the men's breakfast? Who am I talking to? What are the specific places you're going to target your message? You might have some recommendations for other tactics to use, and that might include things like jumping on another bandwagon. And this is exactly what the Ringing Remembers campaign was about. We jumped on another bandwagon. I don't think it would have been anywhere near as successful as it was as a standalone recruitment project, to be fair. But because it was associated with the anniversary of the end of the World War, it meant so much in the public consciousness. A lot of publicity was already out there for us. People were just looking for a way to be part of this particular moment in history. But on a much more local level, other bandwagons to jump on could be, your flower festival. If you're holding a flower festival, why don't you offer to ring for it? And they'll put in their publicity about the flower festival that the bells will be ringing as well. The PR's done for you. Heritage Open Days, a little bit difficult at the moment, obviously, but having that as a PR exercise, you've got materials there from Heritage Open Days that you can use, that you can, it's all there ready for you just to use. Any other kind of local community event could be something else that you can just jump on that bandwagon, something that you can be a part of as well. And the next steps is basically, this is your action plan for getting on with it, a to-do list, if you like. So we need to think creatively. So this is where it starts getting a bit interesting. Basically, start with anything goes. No idea is a bad idea. You might have to rule some of them out a bit later on for cost or health and safety reasons or whatever, but don't let that stop your creative juices in the first place. Try and get out of the habit of saying, you know, we've already tried that and it didn't work. It didn't work then, but things have changed and people have changed and things have moved on. So it might work now with a bit of a tweak. And the other one is, and I think it was Henry Ford said something like this: if we always do what we've always done, then we're always going to get what we've always got. So again, one of the things about Ring and Remember's campaign was the imagery. I don't know if you recall it. I actually got quite a lot of stick over the images that we used on the posters, and people were saying, you know, it's not what ringing, you know, it doesn't represent a true image of ringing, and the bell in the corner's up wrong. My response to that was, does Joe Average in the street know that? No. Does Joe Average in the street care that the bell's up wrong? No. They can see it's a bell. They know it's about bell ringing. They're attracted by the colours and the imagery. You know, it obviously worked because we sent out something like 1,800 A3 posters and 30,000 leaflets. So clearly lots of people use that imagery. So make sure that you know what the project goals are. Keep them in mind at all times. Are you trying to recruit? Are you trying to raise funds? What is it you're trying to attract? Make sure you have all those facts in mind. If you're raising funds for a restoration project, make sure you know how much you're trying to raise, what the project actually entails, and so on, so that you can answer those questions easily as you go through. Use your own experiences and expertise to fill in the story. So you know the people, you know the bells, you know the local community. You've got, you know, other events that you can draw experiences from to fill in that gap. Look for synergies, for combinations that tie in with your objectives. So is the school having a fete? If so, could you take along some handbells or a mini ring for people to have a go on? Is the town centre having a celebration day? Did you actually know that a lot of counties have a county day? I only found this out very recently. There is a thing. Essex, where I'm from, has a county day. Apparently it was the 19th of September. And usually there's a whole festival somewhere. And it's been going on for some 40 odd years. Now, I've lived in Essex all my life and I've never heard of it before. But I have now and I'm going to use it. So could you use things like this to organise ringing in all your towers across the guild, for example, to have a go and say, you know, on whatever county we are, on our county day, all the towers in our county are going to ring to celebrate county day. You know, could you include that as an excuse for a mass recruitment opportunity? I don't know. If you find yourself stuck for ideas, or you're just going over the same thing again and again, sleep on it, take a break, do something else, step away from the keyboard. They say that often the best ideas come when we least expect them, usually in the shower, I find, in the morning. Keep a checklist, and this is really important. If you're anything like me, I've got a memory of a gnat and I can't remember everything or what I've done and where I'm at. So I am known as a bit of a spreadsheet fiend. Keep a list of your ideas and the pros and cons of each, and what you've included and what you've taken out. You can extend this to include all of the activities involved in each idea and the cost and the time associated with each idea. It's always a good idea to try and run your idea by someone else as well, preferably someone not connected with it. Does it make sense? Does it grab their attention? Can they understand the language that you're using? Particularly if you're writing an article or producing a leaflet or other materials, it's always a good idea to get someone else to proofread it as well before you send it off. And it's really good to kind of generate ideas together. Creativity sparks creativity. Someone might have the nub of an idea, and chatting about it might spark something for someone else, and they can develop that idea into something, you know, truly amazing. Try not to make the team too big though, because otherwise you get into this realm of groupthink where everyone just sort of churns out the same thing or variations on a theme, and you'd end up doing nothing. But you know, a small group, 2 or 3, 4 people is enough to really get some juices going. So moving on to tactics then, these are the tricks and gimmicks that are going to get you noticed. And again, it needs to be appropriate for what it is you're trying to achieve. So if there's a newsworthy event happening nearby and it's going to be featured on the local news bulletin, for example, if the bells are ringing in the background as the piece is being recorded and going to air, then whoever tunes into that news bulletin will hear your bells. So example of this, last year at Chelmsford, where I ring, we were asked to ring for a memorial service for a footballer. Apparently he was quite well known, Leyton Orient footballer. I know nothing about football, meant nothing to me, but hundreds of football fans turned out throughout the town. Celebrities turned out, famous footballers and managers and everyone, and they were all being interviewed on local TV in the grounds of the cathedral before the service. We'd been asked to ring, and we were paid a nice hefty sum for doing so, thank you very much. But throughout the piece that was broadcast on BBC Look East later on, the bells were ringing in the background. It wasn't a recruitment campaign, it wasn't a fundraising exercise, but it was still commented on by the reporter, and not in a bad way. They said, you know, as the bells ring out to celebrate the life of this particular person. Sometimes it's just about being heard. You can use multiple props when you talk about bell ringing, you know, a bit of old rope, mini bells, hand bells, complete mini ring installations, bits of bell fittings, whatever you can lay your hands on. If you're giving a talk to a specific interest group, you know, take some stuff along that would be of interest to them. Put the spotlight on that particular prop and talk about it in a way that that group of people will become fascinated by what it is, how it works, where does it fit in with the rest of it, and so on. Staging contests and things is a little bit trickier, although one idea we did a little while back was to have our tenor down, 35.5 hundredweight tenor, and our open day, and we challenged the adults to try and make it chime without lifting their feet off the floor. So we demonstrated that it could be done at first, and it has to be said, it was particularly the men were desperate to show their strength. And of course, then I showed them that it wasn't all about brute strength. We had a smaller bell down for the younger people to have a go with as well, and it got them very engaged and, you know, competing with their siblings and their friends and their parents, and, you know, it really got quite intense at one point. You know, it helps if there's a prize at the end, but it doesn't have to be expensive. You know, even something as simple like a little sticker that says "I rang the big one," or, you know, a bell-shaped memento or a cookie that they can take away and eat, and things like that. It's just about getting people talking about bells. Hosting events does require a little bit more consideration. You need to make sure that you cover off all the health and safety issues and safeguarding issues. Your church might ask you for a risk assessment. If you're going to have demonstration ringing or have a go session, can you actually go and see the bells easily? Are you going to lay on refreshments? How many people do you need to support it? How are you going to capture everyone's contact information if they're interested afterwards? Going viral is very of the moment. With the advent of social media, making sure that you have a presence is really important. Do you have a Facebook page? Do you have a Twitter account or a website or a YouTube channel? Are they linked to the church's website? Think about what the kind of content that you want to put up. You know, have you got videos of ringing or talks or training seminars, or do you want to live stream an event? Using hashtags to link into community sites or event sites. Hashtags can be really useful in spreading the word through viral means. If I share something on my Twitter page, each of my contacts sees it, and anyone that follows any of the hashtags that I've attached. The people that then see the tweet and the retweet and the likes from my contacts will also then see it, and it spreads organically from there really, really quickly. So you might need to think about what media to use. And the idea of using different media types is to create engagement, visibility, to convert contacts into actual uptake, and to promote, and where appropriate if you've got something you want to sell. So print could cover anything from a newsletter, and it could be your own, or an article in the church or community or guild newsletter. Press releases and radio interviews need to be current, need to have a current thread. There's no point in telling them about something that happened last week or something that's not happening for another month yet. They're not interested in things that are too far away. Their attention span is really, really short. Social media is the interactive technology platform that covers everything from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Pinterest, and anything else in between. And most of this is free and reasonably easy to use, and it helps spread your messages far and wide really quickly. And it's really good to get sort of younger people engaged in helping you use these channels to spread your messages. YouTube allows you to store video footage and live stream events. And again, make sure that there's nothing there that's going to catch you out with regard to health and safety or safeguarding or bringing ringing into disrepute. But it's a really great way to show people what ringing is about, how it works, if they can't actually be there in person. Your website can carry all of your information about your bells, your practices, service ringing, special ringing, and other events and activities. But this is more of a static site than social media, but it does need you to update it on a regular basis, keep it fresh, keep it interesting. You do need to be conscious of whether your website is for people who know nothing about ringing and might be interested in finding out more, or is it a repository of information for your existing ringers? And I would posit that most bell ringing websites are actually a bit of a combination of both. But you might be wise to decide what is its main purpose. Exhibitions, can be held anywhere, so in the church or at a community location, but they need to be eye-catching. Short, punchy text elements with lots of bright and engaging photos. People looking at an exhibition will not spend too long trying to read great swathes of information and text and looking at tiny little dark photographs. Make it big, make it bright, make it bold. The photos need to be, I'd say, at least A4 in size, with really good lighting and a really good resolution to be eye-catching. If you're giving a presentation, make sure that it's interesting. Run through it with an outsider to check it, and not death by PowerPoint. So I'm sorry for those who've probably switched off by now. This is a bit of death by PowerPoint. But it's a bit more difficult to do much else via video conference. You can get your presentation across without using PowerPoint, for example. If we were doing this in a room together, I would probably have a maximum of 4 or 5 slides, but I would have you all creating something, using materials and making it much more engaging and interactive, giving you something that you can physically take away at the end of the day. You just have to trust me on that one. So, as I mentioned earlier, contact lists. This is one of the key things I learned from the Ringer Remembers campaign, was to keep a contact list. I was in touch with so many people, radio, TV, print, government department people, ministers, third-party organisations, the Big Ideas Company, all sorts, and ringers, of course. Trying to remember who was who, what their involvement was, what their contact details were, was an absolute nightmare. So I reverted to type and set myself up a spreadsheet, and I still use it today. This can be translated to a much more local level by, including the contact details of your vicar and the church wardens, or maybe the parish architect if you've got to include them as part of a restoration project, or it might be the contact for the parish magazine editor, or the local paper or radio contact, or the council, or the local interest groups, scout and guide leaders, school contacts, the libraries, all of that sort of thing. If you're doing something bigger, a restoration project, for example, then maybe you want to keep all the contact details for the contractors to hand, or anyone that's offered, assistance with free labour and all those kind of stuff. At a guild level, you might want to include some of the diocesan office information, like their communications officer, the diocesan advisory committee secretary, the bishop's office, safeguarding officer, if you've got like the friends of whatever church, different fundraising organisations, local heritage groups, as well as TV, radio, local contacts. You'll learn over time who to contact for what, when to contact them and how. Sometimes it can be really random and off the cuff. So I don't know if anybody saw back in May, at the end of May, the 10 o'clock evening news on BBC One. There was an article at the end about ringing room and ringing during lockdown, and an interview with Anthony at Southwark. That came about initially by a pure chance tweet that came into my Twitter feed. I saw a tweet from someone saying that they were looking forward to starting their new role as the production manager for the BBC Religious Affairs and World News. So I rather cheekily responded by saying, congratulations on your new job. If you ever want to know anything about bell ringing, particularly at the moment as we won't be able to ring for VE Day 75 because of lockdown, then let me know. Within 48 hours, we'd had a couple of phone calls. He was interested in bells having run for VE Day, but also we spoke of the evolution of ringing room during lockdown and how we were using that to continue to connect with ringers across the world. A few more phone calls and emails later, and it's on the 10 o'clock news. And that all came about by a cheeky chance text message. Your go-to person, it becomes that radio research assistant or the TV production assistant or the newspaper journalist, someone who doesn't mind you reaching out to them when you've got something to share. One of my contacts works for a press agency, and what that means is I will send him some information or an article that I've written. He will then write it, rewrite it or whatever into journalist style, and he sends it to all his press contacts across national media. They may then well pick up his article, and sometimes they come back to me for clarification or for an interview, or to check some facts. His reach is greater than mine and quicker, and therefore I know I can use him to get the message out quicker and wider. This is what got bell ringing on the front page of The Guardian back in June. But just be careful not to overdo sending everything to all of your contact lists. Sometimes it's not relevant for them to have that information, or you may inadvertently share someone else's information that you don't have permission to do. And if it's to do with a restoration project, for example, it may involve commercially sensitive information, like a quote from a rival company. So be really careful about what you share, when you share it, and who you share it with. So moving on to a few general principles then, about public relations and communications as well. Decide what you're going to communicate. For example, as far as the Guild is concerned, you might want to consider all Guild events should be advertised and publicised via all communication channels available. All Central Council updates, might be shared on the Guild communication channels. Your districts who have their own social media sites should be encouraged to share any information with the Guild site and vice versa, so that you've got that cross-fertilisation of information. Have those positive engagements with external stakeholders via appropriate shared, retweeting, commenting, using the appropriate hashtags and so on. You might need to think about who can share what. So you might have different people with different responsibilities in your tower or your district or your association that might have access to different parts of your channel. So you might have a webmaster, you might have a social media person, you might have a separate newsletter editor, or district officers or Guild officers, and they might all have their own designated areas of management, if you like. When you share things is quite crucial, and some of the things that you might need to consider is, you might want to schedule some events. Facebook and Twitter have a scheduling facility, and you can make sure that your webmaster or your newsletter editor has got things in good time to hit their print deadline or their upload deadline. You might want to decide, if you're going to share Central Council updates, is it crucial that they're shared on the same day that the Central Council posts them? Some of them are, some of them less so. You might need to think about updates might need to be limited to perhaps no more than one a day to avoid over posting. and some of the importance of some messages getting lost in the traffic and the noise of lots of posts. So you might want to have something like a shared calendar or something. So, you know, a calendar of what you're planning to publicize and when, to avoid that over posting stuff. You might want to think about the language and style that you use, and it might be you need to adopt different styles for different publications, and that will depend on, again, what you're trying to circulate and the limitations of the media that you're using. So, you know, a tweet only has a certain number of characters, so, you know, whole paragraphs and swathes of document aren't going to work. But it's about using, you know, perhaps a professional tone wherever you can, and items that you publish on the website or your Facebook page, for example, perhaps should always have the name of the person who wrote that piece, just so that you can see that it just comes from a legitimate source. You know, social media platforms generally adopt a more relaxed style, but again, you should still try and maintain it within the bounds of, you know, presenting your association or whatever, your tower, in a professional manner. Thinking about the quality of your outputs, if you like, so anything that you publish on behalf of your tower or your guild, whether it's online or in paper form, you know, perhaps needs to bear the guild's logo or your tower logo or your church. If you've got a registered charity number, is it appropriate to put that on? Any new materials, as I said earlier, you know, get someone to proofread it, make sure there's no spelling or grammatical errors or formatting errors. Anything that you've published or produced should portray the professional manner of the association, again, not bringing it into disrepute. And if you're using images, again, make sure they're compliant with safeguarding, GDPR, copyright requirements, and they're of a good resolution to show either in print or on your website or social media sites. You might want to think about branding your event, or anything that the guild sends out. You know, you might want to adopt a certain style of branding, and this is the outward facing image of your guild or your tower or whatever, and it should be instantly recognizable and give that air of familiarity. Using, you know, a particular logo or particular text style, font, or particular way that you format your documents or whatever, it just, you know, adds to that old professionalism, and that element of trust that has come from a trusted source. So moving on to dealing with the press, God, these are tricky little ones. It's reporters and journalists, they're always working to a deadline. If they've contacted you, their deadline is now. For example, one Sky News reporter phoned me on a Sunday morning at about 11:30. I'd just got back from morning service ringing myself. She wanted a group of ringers to film that afternoon at 2 o'clock for a piece to go out on the 5 o'clock broadcast that day. Oh, and they needed to be somewhere near Salford. I'm in Essex. I don't know anybody in Salford. So I set about looking up contact information for the nearest guild and the branches, and I tried to get hold of someone. Needless to say, a lot of them were still out ringing, probably. I'd left messages, I sent emails, tweets, and I was waiting for responses to come back. An hour later, this Sky News reporter phoned me up and said, is it sorted yet? Where am I going? So I had to explain to her that, you know, it's not that easy. I've got to get hold of people there. They've got to get hold of a band of ringers. They've got to find a church that doesn't mind being filmed and doesn't mind ringing at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There's lots of conversations and things to do first. Anyway, the good news is, bell ringers being the resourceful bunch that we are, it happened and the bulletin was recorded and it went out as requested. My lunch was late and I spent the afternoon fretting as to whether we'd managed to pull it off, but we did. If you're going to ask media to carry a story for you, or a promotion for an event for you, bear in mind they will have their deadlines for getting editorial approved. Usually it's about lunchtime for that evening or next day publication. But if your story isn't specifically time bound, then give them a clue as to when would be the best time to run it. A journalist will always have an agenda if they're contacting you. They want the gossip, they want something that's going to sell. or get people talking about their news. Recently, I had a phone call from an organisation who'd read one of Simon Linford's president's blogs, where he'd mentioned being frustrated about not being able to be back ringing yet. This very, very sharp lady was on the phone asking me, well, what does he mean by that? What, or better still, who is he frustrated with? I fluffed about a bit, and not wanting to put words in Simon's mouth, suggested that he was probably a bit frustrated about not being able to go ringing yet, but we're hopeful that we'll break through soon, or we'll get to some form of ringing before long. That seemed to placate her, but be clear on the message that you want to make. Take notes with you if that helps, keep you on track. Try not to get drawn into giving a personal opinion. They will always want to say, and what do you think about something? So just try to stick to the facts where you can. Tie-ins, as I said earlier, are a really easy way of jumping on a bandwagon for another event, just adding your little bit of element to it. This is your chance to say a bit more, rather than just say, well, yes, we'll be ringing to mark the anniversary of whatever it is. Include a bit about how bell ringing is symbolic with the celebration, anniversaries and commemorative events, or something similar. Earlier this year, for example, the Church's Conservation Trust wanted to promote their champing offer. So they linked it with us, we linked it with them, and they offered bell ringers a discount for booking a holiday in a disused church. For those that weren't paying attention, it was on the Central Council website, and it was in social media, and it was in the ringing world, if you missed it. When someone runs your article, it's always nice to thank them for covering your message, whether it's TV or radio, whatever. Send them an email to say thank you very much for the coverage, really appreciated that, it's really helped get our message across. Because now you've made that connection, you have that contact you can use again, and make sure you've added their contact list details to your contact lists. Generating buzz. This is a general term for being talked about, getting other people to talk about you. And this, by far, the best bit of PR, the easiest bit of PR is by word of mouth. A buzz hub is any group of connected people, basically. So it could be a group of experts. So these might be bell founders, bell hangers, rope makers, other companies who are experts in the bell industry. Or it could be a group of local historians interested in the church architecture and what's up those spiral staircase. A social hub is more, perhaps the sort of thing about, you walk into the pub after practice night and someone calls over, oh, here come the bell ringers again. Did you have a good practice? Sounded good tonight, or not, as the case might be. Everyone else sat in that pub has just heard that and just noticed that you're the bell ringers and this is what you do. And then you come down the pub afterwards for a beer. If you do that, you might be starting a new job somewhere and your colleagues want to find out a little bit more about you and what you do outside of work, so you tell them you're a bell ringer, but tell them in an enthusiastic way, because then they'll become more inquisitive about it. As I mentioned earlier, you can use tags and hashtags on social media, which lets you keep track of the buzz that's associated with your message. If you search hashtag bell ringing on Twitter, you get to see all the latest chatter about bell ringer related things. You can track how people have heard about your event simply by asking them as part of an evaluation process. It's always a good idea to respond to any kind of noise and buzz in response to your PR, and engage with people. And anyone that perhaps turns something into a negative, like, oh, then bell ringers are back again making a racket, respond to that in a positive way and say, well, we've been out of action for a while, it's nice to be back. We appreciate not everybody's a fan of ringing, but perhaps if you'd like to come along and have a look, you might find out some more about it. People will talk about things that they've had personal experience of. If you hold an open day or have a go session, they're going to tell their friends what they did at the weekend and their family, and this is where you need to make that experience the best it could possibly be. If you can, get some testimonials, ask them what they enjoyed about the experience most, and then you can use that as part of ongoing and future PR campaigns. Dealing with crisis is, we always hope that it's never going to happen to us, our tower or within our guild. but the odd crisis does come up from time to time, whether it's an accident in a tower that the local press got hold of, or a safeguarding issue that ends up in court where they happen to say, you know, Joe Blogg's bell ringer at XYZ church. It has happened within bell ringing, and it will happen. So best to have a plan, really. Developing your plan can be really simple. You know, something simple as deciding who's going to take charge of dealing with everything. You know, who's going to be finding out the information, who's going to be responding to queries that come up. One of the first things I set up as Central Council PRO was a list of what I called holding statements. These are statements that the council can use if it's being asked to comment on something that's happened. Twice since then, I've used holding statements associated to accidents that have happened in towers where the press want the council to comment on them. Now, a holding statement is basically acknowledging their request for information, but it's not actually providing them with any information yet, because you don't know that yet. You haven't got to the bottom of it. And sometimes the press calling you about an incident might be the first you've even heard of it. So you need to do a bit of digging around. In identifying a crisis, you need to collect all the information surrounding the incident that you can. What happened, when, where, who was involved, you know, and what's going to happen next. You need to be mindful, though, and respect privacy, and not release names or specific details if asked not to, or if there's some form of formal investigation taking place. If you need to alert anyone outside about the incident, you know, this is done during your assessment. So for all incidences that I'm made aware of, for example, I always copy Simon as president of the council in, just in case he gets asked by other means. You need to assess whether a formal statement needs to be made by anybody, including to your own ringers, because, you know, they want to know if something's gone on and what's happening, and is the person all right, and how's that going to affect things. With the advent of social media, you know, it doesn't take long for news to spread, and people being what they are, they'll start to make assumptions, they'll start to speculate as to what's happened and how it happened and who was involved. And, you know, sometimes they get it completely wrong. So it's better to put a stop to it as soon as you can. In responding to a crisis, you know, always be truthful, even if that means admitting that you don't know the answer. Be prepared to respond. Don't wait until something happened and then spend the next 24 hours thinking about it. Be compassionate. Usually bell ringing crises are around injury or safeguarding concerns, and therefore, you know, be understanding and empathetic to the injured parties. Respond quickly, and don't stand around waiting for, you know, someone to instruct you to do something if you're the person charged with answering questions. If you're that person, then get on with it. Saying no comment can be mistaken for having something to hide, when actually what you mean is, I don't know. So if you don't know, then say, I don't know. I'll get back to you on that one. Always return calls and messages from the press. Again, by not responding, it might seem that you've got something to hide, or the longer you take to respond to things, the more the situation could get out of hand. Don't avoid the press. If you need to make a statement to set the record straight, or you need to issue a holding statement to give yourself time to get that information, then do that. Always admit if something's wrong. Whilst we hope that most people do a risk assessment to avoid accidents, unfortunately they do still happen, and there's always something that can be learnt from it. So learn from it and let people know how you're going to fix it so it doesn't happen again. So I just want to point you in the direction of some resources that might help you with some of your PR. These are on the Central Council website. We have a selection of recruitment leaflets, Tower Open Day posters, porch notices, and a lovely little document called Engaging with the Public, which gives you some ideas about how you can engage and do some of your PR exercises. So do take a look at those if any of those are useful for you. So I've come to the end of my talk. We've covered an awful lot of stuff. Some of it is going to be useful at a local level, some of it at a bigger level, some of it might not be useful at all. That's fine. Do what you will with it. I am more than happy, Arthur, if you are, to try and answer any questions if anyone's got any, or if anyone's got any examples of some good practice that they'd like to share. That'd be great to have that. So perhaps Arthur, I don't know if you
Yeah.
deal with that one.
Vicki, thank you. First of all, there are some questions coming in actually that I think are definitely worth sort of discussion and to ask you about. First of all, though, thank you so much for that. I think it's a really, really thought-provoking presentation you've just given us with lots and lots of practical examples as well. So thank you for that.
Sorry, it was very long-winded.
Not at all, not at all, not at all. A couple of questions that come in actually, and again, just remind people. I think I think probably sort of 10 minutes of questions if that's okay.
Okay.
So again, just remind people to type it into the chat box, or you can raise your hand if you fancy talking. But whilst you're talking about resources there, Vicki, a question's coming from Simon around social media. So in his association, there's an active no social media policy, and doesn't believe there's a PR officer. So publicity is left to be managed locally on a tower-by-tower basis. Many local ringers are not internet savvy, but have potential to be excellent advocates for ringing. Is there any training available, ideally for free, on what social media is and how to effectively use it?
Yes and no. So anyone that was at the art conference in March, and anyone who was at last year's Central Council meeting at Goldsmiths, there was a talk given by three ladies, some of whom are on this call, about social media and the different types of social media that are available and the best uses for what type of social media and how you might use it. There's a really good talk that they did. Perhaps I'll have a chat with them offline and maybe we can do something as a link, maybe a recorded Zoom or something like that, where they could reignite their presentation and share that with you. I think Alison Everett is on the call and giving me a thumbs up, so we'll take that offline and we'll sort something out.
Well, you're welcome to come back and host it live at some point in the future if you wish.
Alison can do that.
Come back.
Yeah, no, thank you. We had a good presentation at the ART conference, and we tried to pack far too much into not very much time. But there's also we had a couple of other people as well from Hampshire and Essex. So yeah, we can certainly put a package together for people to show them how to do things. And we were hoping to do that at the Central Council AGM this year and do some little workshops in Nottingham. That didn't happen. So yeah, we can try and do it online. It's not a problem.
Yeah, I'll catch up with you, Alison, and we'll chat about that.
Cheers.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Excellent. Thank you. I'm sure that'd be really well appreciated by people here. Thank you, Alison, as well. Question from Philip. Could you please give an example of a holding statement?
Yeah, so a holding statement could be something as simple as, thank you very much for your inquiry. We understand that there has been an incident at XYZ Church. We are currently ascertaining the details and we will share further information with you as and when appropriate. Doesn't need to be any more explanatory than that.
Thank you very much. That's the sort of thing I was expecting, but it's nice to have that confirmation. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I had a thought, really, Vicki, but I'm having the question, and you touched on it when you talked about the buzz around ringing. But I wonder if, at a very simple level, us ringers sometimes are not the best advocates for ourselves, in terms of our PR. I know when I think about at work, I certainly don't really talk about being a bell ringer very often. I don't know why. I don't know why I hide that, whether I'm just embarrassed or think that people have perceptions about that. But actually, whenever I do talk about bell ringing, people are always fascinated by it. I just wondered what your thoughts were on sort of us advocates.
Again, I think it's where you are in your bell ringing journey. I think learners are terribly enthusiastic because it's new and it's all exciting, and it's like, oh my god, I tried this and I went and did this and it was oh my god, my head's going to explode with all this information and stuff. So I think new people tend to kind of get really buzzy about it. I'm a person who, as you said in your introduction, I've currently got about 5 or 6 jobs on the go at the moment to do with bell ringing. So I vomit bell ringing all the time. My boss knows that I will get phone calls from press or from members of the exec committee or whatever during the day. I've been in a conference at work with my boss. She's been mid-flow of something, and I was like, yeah, sorry, I got to take a call, bye. You know, she understands that, she knows that, you know, she's like, yeah, whatever. You know, it's about your own enthusiasm for what you do. You know, you enjoy ringing for whatever reasons you enjoy ringing for, and you know that should flow from you. You know, I enjoy meeting people, I enjoy the challenge of, you know, physically ringing and learning new stuff, and I enjoy talking to people and going new places and stuff like that. And it's like, you know, I go on bell ringing holidays, for goodness sake, you know. So I guess it's your own internal view of ringing. If ringing is a chore for you, it's like, oh, it's Monday night, I've got to go practice night, you know, you're not going to be given that bus. If it's like, oh, it's Monday, you've got to go ring and say, you've got to get home from work really quick, you know, can't stop, bye, you know, talk to you tomorrow, sort of thing. People are going, where are you going, what are you doing, what are you going there for, didn't you do that last week? You know, simple, you know, water moments, you know, when you're at the water tank at work, you know, it's like, oh, what are you doing at the weekend? Well, I've got 3 meetings, a Zoom meeting, a ringing room session and presentation to give, so not a lot, no.
Super. Thank you. The chat box hasn't gone quiet, but I'll come back to that in a minute. But I don't think there are any more questions in the chat box. I don't think any more questions in the room. Susan, I think you had a question, didn't you? You thinking a thought?
Yeah, I did. Write it down. I already wrote it down. So
yeah, good plan.
Should I just do I do it now or not?
Yep. Yeah, it's now the good time.
How can we improve public relations for young people?
You know, I think the best people to do that are other young people.
Yeah.
So, you know, you got into bell ringing for whatever reasons you got into bell ringing, and I'm assuming that you enjoy it, right? Yeah. So it's about you talking to your friends at school or at college or at any of the other places that you go and spend time with other young people. And, you know, the more you can talk to your friends about it and share, you know, the good times that you're having, you know, the fact that you meet lots of new people and, you know, you're involved in finding out all this information and stuff like that. Young people, I think, are the best people to talk to other young people because they talk the same language. You know, I've done, you know, and I'm conscious that some of my talk was a bit businessy speak. You know, if I was doing that talk to a group of youngsters, I would have changed the language a little bit more to be a bit more down with the kids. But, you know, a bit long in the tooth for that, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
Super. Thank
you
for
that. Good question, Susan.
Yeah. Thank you, Vicky.
Will Bosworth, I think you have a question.
Hello, Will.
Hello. Am I working? Yeah. Thanks. I mean, I take my hat off to you, Vicky. Alison was very kind at the beginning and said that, you know, I was here to learn something, but I take my hat off to people who do external relations, because all of my audience are sort of, I'm preaching to the converted. So I find that, you know, massively difficult to imagine doing what you do. And that's sort of my question, which is along the same lines as some of the others. I know what I love about ringing, and I'm not sure that I would convert the layman by telling them about it. What are some really good examples of that you've had of the aspects of ringing to talk about that really engage people who haven't got a clue? You know, is it competitiveness? Is it memory? Is it the sound? Is it the physical thing? And then I had a secondary question in the style of a coronavirus presentation, which was along the same lines. Is any audience good, or do you think we shouldn't care who we're talking to, or do you think we should actually be more targeted? about the people who we're trying to convert to become ringers?
Yeah, so the two very, very similar questions there. So essentially, you know, you say you know what you're enthusiastic about ringing, and anything that you talk about that you're enthusiastic about will shine through the way you talk about it. And it doesn't matter if you are talking about, you know, method construction or you know, health and well-being, or whatever aspect of ringing it is that gets you buzzing. The fact that you're talking about it will come through in your facial expressions and your, you know, your kind of exuberance of, you know, how you talk to people. But I do think you do need to target it a little bit more. You know, as I said, I think, you know, if you're going to a group, a special interest group, and it may be you know, a bunch of church architects, for example, you know, they're going to be interested in, you know, the mechanics of how bells work. They're not going to be so much interested in the fact that, you know, it's a good social thing. You know, there might be as a secondary, but their prime interest is going to be about how the mechanics of a bell might work. You know, if you're talking to a group of young people, you might be pitching it along the lines of, you know, it's a great social activity. It's, you know, you can get everyone together and you can be competitive about it, because, you know, kids are notoriously competitive with each other and other, you know, adults as well. So I think you do have to tailor your conversation to your audience a little bit more. So it's about knowing who you're going to and who you're having that conversation with. You know, as I said, I vomit bell ringing all the time at work, and the guys at work now actually say to me, "So what are you doing at the weekend?" "Oh, I bet you're going ringing, aren't you?" It's like, yeah, actually I am, or not, as the case might be at the minute. And actually they start asking me questions. Well, so what do you do when you get there, and why do you go so often, and all this kind of stuff. But your enthusiasm for whatever aspect of ringing gets to you is gonna show through in how you talk to people, because you talk about anything that you're interested in. It could be gardening, it could be, you know, your children. People can see that your face lights up when you talk about it. Does that answer your question, sort of?
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Will. Thanks, Vicky. Alison's asked a question, but actually it's more of a question for me about recording the presentation. And I'll just take this moment to spend a couple of minutes just sharing a few things with the audience, if that's okay. Vicky very kindly has allowed us to record tonight. So along with this recording, which will go up hopefully tonight or possibly tomorrow, you will find on our website, and I've just put into the chat box now, where a whole host, all of the talks that we've had since March, the vast majority have been recorded or have resources uploaded. Most of them have been recorded. So please, you know, please do encourage all of you to have a look at that. You're very, very welcome. And, you know, people have spent, you know, like Vicky tonight, have spent an incredible amount of time putting these things together, so they're there to be used. So, you know, we welcome that. Next week, the St Martin's Guild, again, these are weekly sessions. We have John Anderson, who's going to give us actually part 2 by popular demand, a bit of his history. Now that won't go out to sort of central council members, but so it will go internal to the guild. But if anyone wants to attend that or any of our talks, you know, you'll be very, very welcome. Have a look at our calendar. You'll see what's coming up in the future. It's probably best to email smgcbr@gmail.com. I'll put that in the chat box as well. And again, you know, you'll be very, very welcome. As long as you don't get up over 100 participants, because that crashes our Zoom session for various reasons, which we you know, it's highly unlikely we'll get that many. You know, as I say, people are very welcome whenever. So have a look at our calendar to come along. There will be another, and I mentioned at the start, the sort of program events that we want to put together, sort of partnered with St Martin's Guild and Central Council. So the next one of those will be on the 4th of November, which will be based on safeguarding. So again, that will be promoted. However the council promote their material, and obviously Vicky, you promoted this one, so might help us promote the next one, of which of course, you know, I guess that will come around to all of you present there as well. So I think it just leaves me to thank you, Vicky, very much for a really interesting and thought-provoking talk. Please have a look at the chat box. There was loads and loads of well-deserved thanks in there. Some people who had to leave, a couple of minutes ago, thanking you. Lots of people saying how much information was in there. So there's loads of thanks in there. So please go and have a look at that, because I think that they say it far better than I can say it, and I think people here tonight really value the ideas that you've given. So thank you for your time.
No, you're very welcome. Happy to, if anyone thinks of a question offline, email me, pro@cccbr.org.uk. If you've got specific questions you want any help with, happy to pick that up afterwards.
Thank you. So if no one else has anything to say, then I think I will again thank Vicki and turn the recording off and say goodbye.
Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Night, everyone.